It is my pleasure now to introduce to our audience again, Dr. Patrick Joseph, who has been here nearly every week to give us information about COVID. One of the neat things, and I may have mentioned this last time, but I want to mention it again. Dr. Joseph was awarded by the San Ramon Chamber of Commerce as the San Ramon Valley San Ramon's Educator of the Year Award. And it was something that you are the first sort of non-educator, not involved as a teacher, but everybody thought that no one has taught us better about how to deal with COVID and understand it better than you, Dr. Joseph. It's an award that is well received. And I think in 3 or 4 weeks, there'll be a virtual award ceremony. And along with Citizen of the Year and other awards, you'll be recognized again. So Dr. Joseph, congratulations and welcome to our broadcast again.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, for that introduction and certainly for the acknowledgement. I'm very honored to have received that award and looking forward to the virtual session. I am going to share the screen, and while this is coming up, I want to mention one thing about Supervisor Anderson's comments. Of all of the comments that I have heard, and there have been many in the past weeks about what should be done for families and advice given to families for the coming holidays, Thanksgiving and the Christmas holidays. Supervisor, I have never heard it better stated. I wish, I think what I may want to do is go back and tape that and just plagiarize everything you have said. It was so well done and so organized, and it is a pathway that I hope everyone will follow. Over the past 10 to 11 months, we have gone through an explosion of information about this pandemic. And nothing has surpassed what has gone on this week with the announcement on Monday of a vaccine that appears to be very effective. And I'm going to spend today discussing the vaccine, try to focus on both of the science as well as the common sense. And then we do have time, as Mr. Mayor said, at the end to kind of address almost anything. But I want to emphasize before we get into this that we really need to be proud of the infrastructure that I see that commonly is not seen. This did not just happen because of economy, because of those wanting to develop something. This was an organized effort. The organization behind this is very much like the Bollinger Canyon Bridge. What we all see is the final product, but we don't often appreciate how much time and how much energy has gone into the development of the successes that we have had in an 11-month period. And so I am really proud of everything that has gone on. There have been criticisms of the term Operation Warp Speed. And I honestly don't care what the term is, but I do want to emphasize that what has gone on in our country has been a remarkably organized developmental plan toward achieving a successful vaccine. And many of those under development won't work. And some of those under development will work a little bit, and some of those under development will be fantastic. And so let's be proud of everything that we have done in the United States to get where we have done in such a short period of time. Now, this was the announcement that came out on Monday of this week. Pfizer and BioNTech. Pfizer is a US company. BioNTech is a German company, and they have merged to develop a vaccine. And they announced on Monday that the preliminary announcement showed 90% effectiveness, which is extremely important to all of us, yet it has raised many questions. And I'm going to try to address some of the questions that I get to understand this vaccine. So, the first thing I have on there is July 27th, but let's go back 7 months. On January 20th of this calendar year was the first case of coronavirus infecting a United States citizen. And by July 27th, many vaccine companies, including Pfizer, BioNTech, have developed their phase 3 trials. Now, this is the last of the trials. These are the effectiveness trials that look at both effectiveness and safety. Now, the way these are designed is important. They are designed to have 164 cases of coronavirus infection. That's the way the trial is designed. And this is a pre-trial statistical analysis. So if there are 164 cases of coronavirus in either the vaccine recipients or the placebo, that is enough to do a statistical analysis. And typically, if we were doing a study, we would wait until we hit the endpoint of 164 cases. However, because of the importance, there was an interim analysis when half of the target is met. So half of 164 is 82 cases. And as of September 21, the half target was met. Now, the way these guidelines go is that once a company reaches half target, then they have to put this on hold for 2 months. And after 2 months, can submit that to the FDA for approval. So September 21st, the half target was met. And actually, instead of 82 cases, it was 94 cases. Now, nothing can be done until November 21st, because you have to follow these patients for 2 months before the information can be submitted to the FDA. So the 90% effectiveness is an internal comment from Pfizer. This is not by any external or unbiased individuals. We assume it's correct, but it still has not been looked at by anyone, either in Health and Human Services, the NIH, or the FDA. That's going to happen in the 3rd week of November. And what the company is seeking is a comment from the FDA that this vaccine looks so doggone good that it is going to be approved early. And approved is a term that is often confused. In actual fact, it's authorized for administration to those of us in the United States. And that's what is being sought. If the vaccine information, that is, if the results of the trial are so good, that could occur in a month. It doesn't take long to analyze information. Remember, they're analyzing information where they already have several months of safety data. Now they're going to be analyzing effectiveness. And if the effectiveness looks so good, then it is possible that this vaccine can become available in December. If the information doesn't look good, then it will not be authorized and the trial will continue. As of November 9th, 44,000 individuals have been enrolled, and they're getting very close to 164 cases. Now, I have been involved in clinical trials for decades, particularly going all the way back to AIDS and through Ebola and Zika. And I have been involved with many trials that the results look so good that the trial is stopped. And that may happen. I've also been involved in being an investigator in clinical trials where the results are questionable, so the trial needs to continue. And that's what we're looking for over the next 3 to 6 weeks. Is this going to be an early authorization, or is the FDA going to recommend continuing the trial? Now, some of the questions that I get are about this vaccine. The name of the vaccine is a 162b2. That's just the name that's given in the laboratory. This is just some of what are often called fun facts about the vaccine. It is a 2-dose series. That is dose 1 on day 0, dose 2 3 weeks later, and only those who get 2 doses will be evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. So a single dose is not going to work, or at least thought not to work. It is a 2-dose series. Interestingly, of all of the vaccine companies, and there's over 150, This is the only one that did not accept US government funds as part of Operation Warp Speed, but rather it was privately funded by Pfizer and BioNTech. And it's just an anomaly that that's the way they chose to go. But what that means is the interim analysis was done by Pfizer, BioNTech, not by the US government or the Health and Human Services. So we're both, all of us are sitting with bated breath to see if this vaccine is as good as the press release. And I have some information, but nothing reliable to go either way, so I won't comment. One of the problems with this vaccine is the storage. It has to be stored at 100 degrees below zero. And that will be a limiting factor, but it's also an overcomable factor. This is not going to be a deal breaker. All of us, we have many, many freezers in Contra Costa County that go to 100 degrees below zero. It's a very common laboratory freezer. Now it's a matter of considering how to bring those into the distribution and the supply chain so that we can use it. Yes, it will be a problem, but it's going to be overcomable. After the vaccine is taken out of the freezer at 100 degrees below zero, it's stable for 1 to 5 days. And right now it looks like the 5-day information is very, very good. So it's going to be stable in a regular laboratory or medical or pharmacy freezer for 5 days. So it can be thawed as long as it's used in 5 days. Pfizer BioNTech has said that they will have 50 million doses available by the end of this year. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how you can get so many doses that quickly. But that's their plan. Now, if we go back and we talk about what the unrecognized infrastructure, all of these companies that are developing vaccines and doing clinical trials are not waiting to see if the vaccine works, but rather simultaneously with doing the clinical studies, they're also developing vaccine in anticipation that it will work. And that is part of accelerating the availability. So it's exciting that we will have 50 million doses available this year. 100 million doses should be available by April or May. And although the United States did not fund this particular clinical research, they have committed to purchase 100 million doses at approximately $20 a dose. Now that's pretty doggone inexpensive for a vaccine. I give vaccines in my office that cost $150, $200 a dose. And I'm going to talk a little bit about why this is an advantage. And it's all based on that bottom line, a messenger RNA vaccine. And one of the most common questions that I get is, what the heck is an mRNA vaccine? What does that mean? So I'm going to digress a little bit, talk somewhat about immunology and vaccinology, and try to keep it very superficial, but so we understand mRNA, because there is no existing mRNA vaccine, not one, not in human medicine, not in veterinary medicine. There are many trials, but this is a first. And so it does raise eyebrows, and I want to talk a little bit about it. Let's talk first about this concept of vaccinology. That actually is a specialty. And every year we have a national vaccinology course for scientists regarding the development of vaccines and how it works. The goal of all vaccines, measles, mumps, rubella, chickenpox, rabies, is to neutralize the virus before it causes an infection. So we assume that a person's going to get exposed to the virus, just like we will get exposed to coronavirus. But we want to neutralize the virus before it causes an infection. That's exactly what a vaccine does. If you are immunized to measles or mumps or chickenpox, you will be exposed, but you want to neutralize or kill the virus before it causes an infection. So what a vaccine does is it causes us to make attack proteins, neutralizing proteins. And what I've shown down here in the bottom with this area, this is the virus. And on the end of the virus are these salmon-colored spikes. And this proved to be the name of the game. This is where the money is. The virus spike, not the inside of the virus, not these little funny little proteins, but the virus spike. That is what determines infectivity. And the goal of a vaccine is to make an attack protein, this shown in this teal color, an attack protein or a neutralizing antibody that if I get exposed to coronavirus and I have these attack proteins circulating in my bloodstream, bam, they will inactivate the virus before that virus gets to cause an infection. That is the entire principle of vaccines, making attack proteins to neutralize a virus after exposure so that it doesn't cause an infection. So let's take a look at the usual vaccines. On the left, instead of the salmon color, I'm sorry, these are now magenta color. It's the best I could do. This is a normal whole coronavirus. This is the moneymaker for the virus. This is the spike. This is what causes the infection. And so typically, vaccines would grow this virus in the laboratory, chop it up, and make a real pure process culture of spikes. And since they look like golf tees, I put it over here. That is the typical conventional vaccine. In a laboratory, making spikes and giving spikes as the vaccine. And then what we want to do, if we give a syringe full of coronavirus spikes, we make antibodies to it. And that is the principle of all vaccines that all of us have had. That is, we make some form of the virus, we give it in an injection, and we make antibodies that hopefully will protect it. The problem with this is it is really, really difficult. It takes a long time to make a pure vaccine of spikes. Depending upon how the spikes are made, they may be good or bad. They may be pure. They may be partial spikes. We may not get the response we want. And as we've talked about before, even the flu vaccine, which is based on this same principle, is only about 40% effective. When the coronavirus vaccine development was in progress, the goal was to find a vaccine that was 50% effective. And if we hit 60%, that would be fantastic. And the press release now is suggesting maybe 90%. So what's different about the coronavirus vaccine? This is traditional. This is typical. This is the flu shot you're going to get. You're going to get some spikes or some proteins and make antibodies to it. Well, the mRNA vaccine is a whole lot different. Instead of injecting pieces of the coronavirus spike, we're going to train our body to make pieces of the coronavirus spike. So we're going to inject messenger RNA, and the messenger RNA will direct our own cells to make the vaccine. This is all new, and there's advantages that we'll talk about in a moment, but this is really, really exciting. So we're actually training our own body to make the vaccine. And to put that in a cartoon, this is a person getting the shot. This is the vaccine right here. This is what we're going to give. We're going to give pieces of nucleic acid, ribonucleic acid, or messenger ribonucleic acid. This is the vaccine. The vaccine goes into our normal cells and programs our normal cells to make homemade spikes. We are actually making our own vaccine. This is the coronavirus spike. And then we developed the normal immune response to it. This used to be the vaccine. Now we're making our own. And the result of this is fantastic. It's so pure. It's in such high concentration. It works so well. It develops very, very high antibody levels compared to giving synthetic or fabricated spikes. This is really an advancement in vaccinology. And the advantages are it is much less expensive. We're talking about a little piece of RNA, and almost any molecular lab can make this stuff. This is really easy to make with just amino acids and bases. It's really easy to develop. And if it doesn't work, you just make a modification in the nucleic acid. You don't have to grow up a whole new batch of virus, a whole new bunch of spikes, different ways of purifying it. You just make a minor change in the nucleic acid. And then you have a vaccine that can be modified and improved. And this is the mainstay. Making a traditional vaccine is very difficult, and it takes years. In fact, if you go back to some of the things that was talked about in the spring of 2020, and there were things like, well, we're just not going to see a vaccine for 2 years. That was based on how long it takes to make large numbers of vaccine. It's a very labor-intensive process, but it's not for mRNA. We're going to have one company, Pfizer BioNTech, claims they can have 100 million doses by April. 100 million. Well, we have many other companies out there doing that, all with manufacturing processes. So rapid production is a huge advantage. It's important to recognize the disadvantage. Many of these require very cold storage, but that is overcomable. In fact, as soon as I finish here, I have to jump onto a call with the California Hospital Association about distribution and how we're going to deal with cold storage. It is a disadvantage to have a 2-dose series, and that's built into the vaccine plan. And of course, there is always the disadvantage is this is new. Anytime something is new, we have to keep our eyes open to make sure there's not unrecognized problems. But I can tell you that mRNA vaccines have been in the experimental region for years. They're anti-cancer vaccines. They've been used for rabies in animals, and experimentally, so far, nothing suspicious or of concern has emerged. It looks like this is just a new way of creating a very, very effective, inexpensive vaccine. Now, distribution is important. As I said, as we talk here, there is a distribution conference going on with California Hospital Associations and the California Department of Public Health. It was initially determined by Health and Human Services that there would be a single U.S. distributor, and McKesson was the first individual that got, or the first company that got that. It may be changing now because of the cold storage. It may not be possible for one distributor to distribute this drug quickly. So as of right now, there's talk about this going to retail pharmacies, including Walgreens and Rite Aid and others in our area, if they can ramp up the capacity for cold storage. The way this worked is in October, all states, California included, states, territories, and tribal plans had to be submitted to the Health and Human Services. And our California plan, which is available online, is 84 pages long. And what it describes is how California will distribute the vaccine if we get it. So vaccine, at least at this stage in our pandemic, is not something that you can buy, not something that I can write a prescription for, but rather it will come from Health and Human Services to the states. And then each state and territory has to have a distribution plan. That includes the cold chain management, and then who gets the vaccine first. California has a 4-phase rollout for who gets the vaccine. When we get our first doses, it has to be determined, should it be structured for those who need it the most, or should it be widely available, first come, first serve? And it is the former. It is very critically described, very expertly described as who are the critical populations. And we want those who are at greatest risk to have access to the vaccine first. And that is exactly the way it's designed in California. Certainly, I have not read the plans from all of the states, but it's my assumption that everybody's going to follow something pretty similar. That is, the critical populations will get the first doses. Then built into that is an intensive program for second dose reminders. And then it goes through phase 2, 3, and 4. And this is, just think about this. This is all based just on one vaccine, Pfizer vaccine. But if others are equally effective, the market could rapidly, not the market, but the society could have rapid access to many vaccines. And then, of course, all vaccine distribution has to include safety monitoring. So not only is there going to be safety monitoring federally, every state, including California, will be monitoring the safety of this vaccine. So it's very exciting there. And then the last slide that I want to show you is more of a slide of optimism. We've talked about the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine because they were the first to come out with their press release in Monday of this week, 90% effectiveness. But right behind them are many, many others. And Moderna is also an mRNA vaccine. And it's possible that they will reach their 2-month interim analysis within days and make the same press release that Pfizer made. And I know nothing about Moderna's effectiveness rate except what the rumor mill is, and I don't like to do that. But I can tell you they are very close to accruing their midpoint, which is what Pfizer reached on November 9. The Russian Sputnik, I have no information. This is the vaccine that was released a couple of months ago in Russia, given to healthcare workers in Russia. Very difficult for me to get information that I can relay to you comfortably. AstraZeneca, Johnson & Johnson, Sanofi, Novavax, and this is a partial list of what is in the hopper, how exciting this is for all of us. So I think it's really a time for all of us to applaud what has been going on. I, like everybody who is on this call, have had discomfort. I've had difficulties. I've had to do things that I didn't want to do. We have all had to make sacrifices. But the bottom line is from the National Institutes of Health. This is not my quote. Help is coming, and it's coming soon. It's time for all of us to realize that the sacrifices that we have made has saved lives, and we are really looking at the light at the end of the tunnel. And I'm very, very happy and very proud to be one of the people that can bring that up to you. So, Mr. Mayor, with that positive note, the optimistic sign, the fact that I as an individual am extremely excited, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Joseph. And again, for anybody who really has interest in what's going on, each of your explanations gives us the kind of background to understand what's going on. Newspaper articles tend to be sometimes difficult to translate. So thank you, sir. We always appreciate having that. I want to open up immediately to the public. Steve, we have some questions for our guests or for Joe, perhaps.
Yeah, the first question is, how long will this vaccine last? So after you get the 2 doses, is it a yearly thing? Is it permanent? Do we know that yet?
No. So if we think about this, the vaccine was first given July 27th of this year. So how long it lasts is unknown, but how long it lasts is really easy to measure. Remember, this the purpose of a vaccine is to make attack proteins or to make antibodies. And now we have a simple blood test that tells us the longevity. So if a person, and that's part of the vaccine trial, but if I were to get a vaccine today, it is possible that I could get a blood test once a month and determine how long those protective or neutralizing antibodies last. So the answer is no, we don't know, but it's very easy and will soon be determined.
All right, the next question. Many states across the nation are seeing record numbers of cases and hospitalizations. does that mean the death rate is also likely to increase in a few weeks, or are improved therapeutics likely to keep the death rate lower in the spring?
Dr. Joseph might take a stab at
Yeah,
that.
let's let him, and I'll tell you what my health officer has said after Dr. Joseph speaks.
Well, that's not fair.
No, I.
Let's talk about two terms and make sure that we keep them separate. One is the death rate, and the other one is the number of deaths. And they are distinctly different. The number of deaths, sadly, will increase as the number of people get hospitalized. That many people who are hospitalized will have complications from which they cannot recover because of their age, the risk factors, the underlying comorbidities. That's the raw number of deaths. The death rate is the number of people who die over the number of people who get infected. And that's where medicine has made substantial improvements. The death rate, when it first started out to be almost 15% in those of advanced age, even though globally it was about 3%. In those with risk factors, the death rate was 1 in 8. So if an individual was 90 years old and got COVID, he had a substantial chance of not surviving. There has been dramatic improvement in the death rate. Globally, it's down around 1%, but that includes a lot of young children and young kids and adolescents who have a very low risk for complication. But even in the higher risk groups, those of advanced age, obesity, underlying immunosuppression, underlying cardiac disease, underlying metabolic disease, the death rate has dropped down dramatically with the big four. Remdesivir helps, steroids help, convalescent plasma helps, and then other drugs to turn off an overactive immune system. That's the big four. That did not exist in May of this year and is common therapy now. So those are the two things. Death rate will go down. Sadly, the number of deaths will probably increase.
Right.
I've got to agree with everything that, that's what our health officer also is telling us. And from a trend standpoint, generally when we see the hospital numbers go up, about 2 weeks later, we see the number of deaths. Again, as Dr. Joseph pointed out, there's some people who, once they're hospitalized, it's because some of those more conventional treatments are not working. And even with those, they just may not survive.
Steve, I had a question for Dr. Joseph. If this turns out to be roughly 90% effective, and you've talked before about the herd immunity, how many people do you think have to receive the vaccinations before we begin to get to the stage where we've got a handle on the herd? Because it's around 60%, so you have these two different factors involved. Share us your observations on how many people have to get vaccinated before we are getting over the hurdle.
Without having quick access to a calculator, I can't give you the number. Your question was very precise and says how many people. But you did answer the question yourself. If we have active immunity, protective immunity in 60 to 65%, we've made it. A 90% vaccine, then with a very simple statistic, if it's 90% effective, assuming that holds, and we have a population in Contra Costa County of 1 million people, then a very quick calculation would do it. But I'm smart enough not to throw out an answer without doing the calculation. Okay. But that's where we are. It's maybe, let me just say this, Mr. Mayor, it's reachable. And that's the news.
Because if you talk about 100 vaccinations, perhaps by April, and perhaps as many as 200 million by summer, we'll have reached that 60% mark almost. And so it appears as if sometime this year we may be in that stage.
Well, remember the number of doses, we don't want to use US population as the denominator. That's a little short-sighted.
Okay.
We have 330 million people in the United States, but this vaccine is global. This is worldwide.
Ah, okay.
So that's why we need all of the different manufacturers to step up to the plate. We have a global responsibility in society, not just to our own country.
This is an important distinction. So this wasn't 200 US doses. This is 200 worldwide doses.
Well, million, yes.
Million, yes. And
This vaccine, when I was originally doing clinical trials going back many decades, clinical trials were only US. That is only domestic, because we knew we could handle the data better. We had better control of complications. With this Operation Warp Speed, vaccine studies are global. That is, they are not just United States. The Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine included the United States and Germany and perhaps a few other countries in the European Union, of which I'm not aware. So we have to consider a responsibility to our society, to our public in general.
so we're looking at 2 to 3 billion double doses.
Well, in the United States, yes.
No, for the world,
For the world, well, for the world, yeah, billion.
billions.
Yeah.
Billions. That's the key. Okay.
Yeah.
You put it in context. Thank you, sir.
Right.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Steve.
Right. And I have a last one for Dr. Joseph. Did the Pfizer vaccine trial control for lifestyle, where people work, how often they go out? Is it possible that the initial high level of effectiveness in the preliminary results is based in part on individual choices, masks and social distancing?
Very good question. The recipients of the vaccine, which are now in the 40,000, did not know if they received the vaccine or the placebo. Each recipient was instructed to carry on their life as normal and as recommended by their local governments. There was a very sincere attempt to get diversity in the types of individuals who received the vaccine. So in designing the vaccine trials, it was very important to determine ethnic diversity, socioeconomic diversity, racial diversity, so that this vaccine would be applicable to everyone. And that was the only diversity that was written into the plan. There were no instructions whatsoever after receiving the vaccine.
Great. Thank you. That's all the questions we have, Mayor.
Great. One last question I have, if I might, Dr. Joseph. What is the newest word on these quick tests, the tests that can sometimes give you a response in 15 minutes? They've talked about using these at schools and other places for quick analysis. Are they going to become commonplace, inexpensive, accessible?
Every week is better. So we've been developing tests, molecular tests and antigen tests for 8 months. Every week shows better performance, quicker turnaround, and yes, it is coming. We have not reached the test that we would love to have, that is something as quick and applicable as a pregnancy test. We're not there yet. The very quick tests that are good are still in short supply and run approximately $50. But next week will be better than this week, and rapid testing is clearly part of the solution.